Hello and welcome back to The Dive, Season 6, Episode 16.
16.
Wow. 16. Presented to you by players, available on Paramount Plus, probably right now when this releases. It should be coming out on Thursday.
It's been getting some really good reviews. I'm very excited to actually to watch it.
Seen any?
No.
Okay, so let me spoil the show.
Okay.
Right here.
Yeah, before anyone's seen it. I haven't seen any full episodes. I've seen clips and I've seen some screeners and stuff.
Yeah.
Because spoilers, we got to work on some of it, which was really, really
You'll
cool,
see us.
by the way. And our producer for The Dive was also a writer for players, which is also really cool.
There we go.
Shout out to Elias.
There should be a free month trial as well. And I
Yeah.
would encourage anyone who likes League or any esports will probably enjoy this show.
Yes.
Probably.
IGN gave it a 9 out of 10. I saw some.
Oh, really?
9 out of 10. I think it was like Livewire or something, called an instant classic. So the reviews are really positive. So that's making me very excited to see it all put together because I know the story because I was, part of the filming of a lot of it, or just doing like my small part of it. But
You're the
like,
star.
no, you're not going to notice me, but I was there. But it's just interesting, right? Like having the idea in my head of like what happens versus actually getting to see it all acted out is going to be really exciting. I've been kind of wanting to save it all and not fully spoil myself so I can actually experience it as just a watcher.
Yeah.
We were at the little premiere thing they held at the studio. What'd you think?
I loved it. It was hilarious too because I remember seeing the trailer a little while before this, and I wasn't super excited about it. Right? I was like, oh, I don't know about this.
Back for season 3.
I wasn't in it. I got
really?
visa issues. So
Oh, you got screwed.
Well, definitely not being brought back now.
Oh no, don't watch the tape. But no, I watched it, and I was like that annoying guy in a movie theater that was laughing at every joke. In fact, the funniest thing is that I had like some of the Academy boys behind me,
Oh, yeah.
and they just enjoyed the premise, like the entire idea, the awkward moments, everything about it. I thought it was funny.
It's
People
very
around me thought it
real.
was funny. Yes,
Because there's a lot of people who are in the scene, are part of the scene that worked on it. So it's real.
Not super big spoilers, but there's one line of dialogue where like one player's a support player yelling at another player, and he's like, "I've been playing since supports went boots 30 wards," and I was like, "Okay, whoever you had to be playing since season 2 to like put that joke in there," and like that's how it's like, okay, this is pretty authentic.
Yeah.
That like everyone involved.
Are you
Yeah.
feeling like it's like the kid that
He's
A little
I wasn't
bit.
gonna say
A
it, but
little bit.
His seat is
Look,
also
low.
your
shot.
seats are
Look-
so much
Wait,
higher than me.
Yeah, go back to you gotta go
'cause
back
we
to the three
adjusted them.
shot. You gotta go back to the
You
three
gotta
shot. Look at Raz compared to me right now. It's
Bring
like,
your
There
son
we
to
go.
work
There
day.
we go.
It's Raz's first time at Thanksgiving when you get to graduate
the
from the
kiddie
little
table?
kid table.
Yeah.
No, he got to sit at the big kids.
Oh
Where's the
my
booster
God.
seat?
But he's
Where's
like,
the booster?
he's got a couple pillows under his butt, but he's still not quite tall enough.
The worst part is literally just having to pan back and forth. They'd be like, what, hello?
All right. Let's move on to what we're actually supposed to talk about this episode. The patch.
Genshin
Yeah.
Impact.
This is what it is.
Well, it's supposed to be a power
Resident
rank.
refresh.
I just realized like it's actually a power ranking episode, so we will get to that. But before, in case anyone was living under a rock, there was a massive update to the game. They added durability. Is the best way to put it. There's a
Everyone's
durability
very
patch.
durable right now.
They're very hard to break
Extremely
down.
durable.
Yeah. So I don't play the game a ton. Azael, you're maybe you and Raz. Any thoughts playing versus watching? Because there's now also LPL and LCK going on. So I've been watching, but I haven't.
I've been playing a lot. I've also watched like a ton of like people playing, like
Champions
people
Queue.
doing Champions Queue, and
Yeah.
then a lot of people. I mean, TL's boot camp in Korea was like still going on. It felt like a couple days ago.
Yeah.
So I've watched a lot. I played a lot. Scaling just feels way stronger. If you've played with me as Raz has, I like a lot of greedy scaling picks anyway.
Tail
Yeah, he was already doing that
Like,
to
I was
begin
already,
with.
like when I play mid lane, guess what? I love playing like Kassadin and Vladimir and Yone, and top lane I love playing like Nasus and Kale, and like I love scaling picks anyway.
Yeah.
So this is my shit. Like,
He was
like,
waiting for
is-
this all along.
yeah, like I was already doing it. I was just fucking not very durable. Excuse me, back to back. I need to get back in the not cursing.
You're not in solo queue
Yeah,
right now, buddy. You're not in Discord.
I was worried about me.
Yeah,
Too
no, I
casual.
just dropped 2. My bad. No, I mean I'm enjoying it. I do think it's a really good change for solo queue overall. I have a lot of concerns about pro, and we can get to that later. But as far as like my actual enjoyment of the game, I do think it's better. I think burst was was like undeniably too high. Almost everyone I know for actually just playing the game online likes it more. Because it wasn't just like a Kiana who's fed that was one-shotting you. It was like Corki is like doing 80% of your health from across the screen with the big one, or like Aphelios is just gale forcing in on you at 100% HP late game and just one-shotting you or whatever, right? Like there's all these examples of like, aren't you not supposed to be the burst guy? Aren't you supposed to be like the DPS guy? Like, why is the DPS guy one-shotting me, right? So I like the game more now. I think that the HP like increasing. I think that the durability early game makes it feel like there is more going on in the fight rather than just like I pressed my combo and you couldn't do anything, so you exploded. It feels like there's more like kind of like outplay, misplay type opportunities now because the fights last a little bit longer. So I actually really enjoy it as far as playing it. And a lot of the picks that are kind of coming back, and this is like somewhat separate, but not totally. I like Swain. I like the Swain changes. So like this is the first time I've enjoyed Swain since the old Swain, because I actually hated the update personally, but I think that the new one makes it feel more like drain tanky and more kind of like what I wanted it to be instead of this weird dive bomber that they kind of changed him into.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like Senna a lot. Senna's really OP now. Like there's a lot of the picks that I enjoy playing are kind of just strong. So
it's definitely the biggest change, and a change that I've been looking forward to personally, because like every time we go into preseason, I'm like, I just want something to give me that feel and sense of discovery. Whereas like, ooh, the game is different than it was just like last month.
Yeah.
Like holistically different, and I feel like I have to go into the depths, go into the streets, start working on like figuring out, asking people is like, what's strong right now?
Who can build Sunfire plus Demonic?
Yeah.
That's what's going to live right now. If you can build those two items, you are OP.
Yeah, and at the time, I didn't think the durability changes would mean too much, because if everybody's getting like, you know, stats changes, it's like, okay, what's really like, and if it looks very minuscule, it's like, what's really changing? But a whole lot has changed. Kind of, you already referenced it to a little bit, but like LPL has come out and you're seeing things like Kale a lot more. You know, blind Kale.
I don't think that's gonna last, because I think
that is the meta.
So like the blind Kale at the beginning in Champions Queue, we were seeing a lot of Kog'Maw, because Kog'Maw is pretty broken. Some of those changes have been reeled back in, including the turret changes.
On 12-11 got nerfed. Yeah. Tower damage got reduced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rise changes that we're gonna go through got pruned, right?
I don't know too much about the Rise changes specifically.
Rise got buffed on 12-11.
Oh, they still went through. I remember they were talking about.
It might have been not all of them went through. I don't know.
Yeah, I forget what it was.
Release preliminary notes.
Yeah.
There were going to be assassin changes as well. That
Lethality got pulled back.
Yeah.
There it is. And then we're seeing a lot more Azir, Veigar. So scaling is definitely stronger. Picks like Lilia is just far more frequent, and a lot of it is just champions that were like easily assassinated. That really benefited from the extra, boost in resistances and HP, like really now value it and are a lot more playable.
Yeah, and Lilia also, I think, got 12-10 buffs.
Yeah.
Right? And then had to get some nerfs on 12-11 because it was really OP.
Yes.
But, I mean, there's a lot of individual champion balance things that obviously got changed. And that's just going to happen as well. Like, anytime you do something that's really far-reaching, it's impossible to have it come out perfectly balanced.
Yeah.
Like when you're changing items, when you're changing the map, when you're changing base stats for literally every champion, there's just going to be champions that benefit too much or too little from it. And so that's really, to me, what like 12-10 and 12-11 were, is kind of trying to like 12-10 was them saying, this is what we think is going to be too weak or too strong. And 12-11 is kind of like what they got wrong, readjusting to try to bring things back more close to parity.
I think one thing that Raz said that I like, though, is that it doesn't look that different of a game, while being like sweeping changes that like you need to update all your game knowledge on matchups, on build paths, on, you know, what's strong or weak. But for fans just watching pro, there's not like new objectives on the map where you're like, what the hell is that thing? And the Rift now does what now? And it teleports you. And like, it's not like those kinds of changes, but you do get a new meta. You get to see new champions, like the things that are like, oh, Talia's back. Okay, cool. That's nice. There's so many different champions that you're going to be seeing in the first week of LCS and stuff that I think people should be really excited about. Though I think there are meta concerns long-term if we stay like scaling potentially for the whole time. But I think those will get changed around, because the devs have talked before about having a target game time and bloodiness and stuff like that on the MSI episode. So I think they'll go back to that eventually, but I think just like the speed of death and things like that.
Whenever changes like these come through, people will always talk about like the sense of diversity in champion picks right now, where it's just like, oh, if you just specifically like, because Senna is broken, but if you were to ban Senna, like, As an AD player, I feel like I can play a lot more, right? Zeri is a pick that you can go towards. Twitch was a playable pick. I mean, it's still going to be weak in lane, but if you want to play Twitch, you can play Twitch. I saw a few Vayne games because through the durability patches and with some of the tanks comps being a lot more tankier, like you can play it now. Lucian and Nami is still really strong, but like it feels like AD carries are exploring a lot more. Also, Seraphine. So like
Enchanters, baby.
Enchanters are strong. Like non-AD carry bot lanes, which kind of creep in once in a while, is once again strong. That is playable.
Swain was just good in every single lane in 12-10. I don't know how much of a difference the 12-11 changes really made because it was kind of nerfing his scaling, but like he was one of the champions that was literally being played bot, mid, and top, and being good in all three roles. So I mean, I think it's gonna be really interesting. To me, what's been really strong on 12-11 is like tank items, because tank items got buffed, and so like not even necessarily to play tanks, but like Shyvana going, like Frostfire into Demonic, Zach going like Sunfire Demonic. I was even messing around with Kobe was the one who first was telling me about this, but I was trying it as well. Diana with like Sunfire Demonic.
Anytime you get them AP Bruisers back in, let's get some Echo Sunfire Demonic.
Yeah, exactly. You can try this with Echo. You could probably try this with Fizz. Like because it's just like it's such a high percentage of burn. And the tank items make you like so shockingly tanky. Like even things like Kha'Zix. Like so people were doing I think it was like a Gurren or whatever who I was seeing doing this a lot in like Korean solo queue, where he was doing Ghost Gore Drinker Kha'Zix, and you do the R evolve, and then you just kind of like you basically can't get away from this guy. Like you stealth on top of him with Ghost, they like flash away or whatever, but then you just like press R again and you're running 1,000 miles an hour, right? And then you get the W evolve second, and you become very, very sticky because it's like an 80% slow or something with the W. But so now people are I've even seen trying like Sunfire Kha'Zix and stuff, where you're just like it's like the old Eve, like invisible beside you, burning, like
stack fires and run at them.
Yeah, so you can't do that obviously, but it's interesting because it changes the dynamics with some of these champions, where it's like you see something like Kha'Zix or Diana and you're like, like burst them down, right? Like, but you're shockingly tanky, not only from the durability changes, but because Sunfire has, I think it was a bonus 100 extra HP on 12-11. So some of these champions can really be surprising in like how durable they are.
Well, like that's how like the system's coming, because tank items actually were, I think, in an okay spot last split a fair amount of them. Not every tank item, but like it was
no one played tanks besides Ornn.
Right. It was more of a class problem than like the items weren't strong. And now that you generally buff durability, it's like, oh, you slap on top of these items that also got some buffs that were probably already good anyways. And it's like,
the sad part is still people aren't like, yeah, now I could get in there with Mundo.
Yeah, no, you're not.
What if I took Mundo's item and put it on a good champion?
What the hell is a Maokai?
Just more Ornn.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the solution.
Tank Rengar, baby. That's what it is.
Yeah, actually. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. As far as pro play, I have a lot of concerns, and we're going to talk about this much more next week, because next week we have a couple of the devs that worked on these patches coming in to chat with us about implications for pro and kind of like their thoughts on the patch and what they wanted. And so we'll get into that more next week. But my big concern is you made towers harder to dive. You made scaling better. You made action like less incentivized because scaling is better and champions are harder to actually punish. So are we not just in a pro meta where, you just get to the point where it's like, wait for Herald. That's the first time we're going to fight. And the next time we're going to fight is like maybe, a third
it's like
dragon.
chip damage because you can't kill people that easily. So it's just like, oh, my Azir landed more poke than your Ori. So now we get Herald. That's the scary part when you get this really heavy scaling.
Are we just in Corki Azir and like enchanters are good again because enchanters are harder to all in bot lane, right? So if you're not playing engaged supports, like are you just going to be playing like Lulu, Karma, Nami with hyperscaling AD?
With Senaton cantrip is available.
Corki Azir type like scaling stuff mid lane, or like even like a Yone who again isn't going to create like massive action early game, more wants to get the items. Top lane seems like a lot of scaling is really powerful up there as well, whether it's like through split push like Gwen or Fiora, or like things like Kayle even. So my concern is definitely that the game is going to slow down massively, which especially feels like a big 180, and maybe is going to make it feel even worse after MSI, where MSI was a really fast game time, right? Like we were having a lot of these teams that were having sub 30-minute average game time. Some of that is because of one-sided games, but also just in general, the games were way faster. So if we go from like, 29, 30-minute average game time to like a 35, 36-minute average game time with like a lot less kills, it's going to feel pretty bad because I just think those games are a lot less fun to watch.
Yeah, especially like for me, I think there's a little bit of nostalgia where I enjoy large team fights, like those kind of
You
scaling
get some
elements.
high highs.
Yeah, as long as there is something that will always keep you hooked and interested, like Rift Herald fights, Rift Herald is still really important. Stacking dragons are still going to be really important. My concern is always going to be with teams that are, I would say, fourth place and below that struggle ending games. Like if there is going to be a situation where you're now dealing with a Nazir, or just dealing with like, oh, it's difficult to dive into a Vagar or something like that, right? Then the games will just go long. A lot of those games, even in the prior meta, last split went long. Like in fact, I remember FlyQuest versus Team Liquid, where they were trying out an early game focused kind of composition for Team Liquid, and they had like Lucian top versus a better scaling FlyQuest team, and it just went
45
pretty long.
minutes.
Yeah.
Something.
So if a team starts to struggle to end versus a comp that it has decent wave clear, better scaling, I think we'll see a lot more of that.
And tier 2 towers did not get nerfed. Only on 12.11 was only the tier 1s that got pulled back on a little bit. So tier 2 towers are still really strong.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just hoping that the game time and bloodiness tweaks, if they're needed, which they probably will be, come fast enough that the shiny newness of new meta doesn't wear off, because every meta is cool when it starts almost. Like just the fact that you're seeing new champions with new builds, new team comps, all that stuff is going to be fun for a while. And then like mid-season is going to hit, and hopefully the games themselves are exciting, not just shiny new toys.
Yeah, not just that you're seeing new picks.
Yep.
And again, we'll talk a lot more about this next week. I'm sure we have a lot of thoughts on it, but we're gonna have a whole section next week with a couple of the devs, so that should be
People
fun.
can submit questions. You'll be tweeting about it.
Yes, I will. I will tweet it out. But if you guys have any specific questions and just questions for the dive in general, remember hashtag the dive LOL. You can tweet it to us as well, but make sure you use the hashtag because that's how we actually search for the questions when we're here, and how our producers and writers and everyone looks for questions. So definitely make sure you're using the hashtag. But any questions you guys have or thoughts or anything that you want to be given to the devs about this patch, about pro play, we can definitely consider those.
Speaking of Twitter questions, Derek Loves T has a question for us to center us back onto the LCS. Which returning LCS player, and we're just going to do new player to keep this a little shorter, it's which returning LCS player and new player, but we're going to take the new player angle, are you all looking forward to most seeing in the 2022 summer split?
Ooh.
So anyone who's new on a roster is what I'm going to interpret.
Any roster change you're excited about, basically.
I think the obvious one is Jensen. Like Jensen coming back is a big note for all LCS.
Boring. I already saw this years ago.
The fact that he's coming back on Cloud 9 of all teams too. So like there's a bit of nostalgia, and LCS 10 I think is really fun. I mean we're doing that whole watch of like, okay, so there are a lot of mid laners who like him, Jizuke, just like a lot of players that are not on a team. Who's going to come back? When are they going to come back? Which team are they going to come back to? We finally got an answer with Jensen coming back and 2 cores Cloud9, making that team stronger.
You guys know the trend in movies called requels? It's like a remake, but a sequel.
Yeah.
So like they bring in the original people and then they just like make it again.
Yep.
That's what this Cloud9 roster feels like to me. It's like Fudge is back top and Jensen's back
on Netflix.
Yeah. It's the requel of Scream again, or like whatever that trend in Hollywood. I actually don't hate it. I kind of like it. It's going to overstay its welcome pretty soon here.
Yeah. I mean, just remakes and stuff are going pretty ham. Some of them are good though.
Yeah.
So is that your answer as well then, Jensen?
No, I mean it probably would be, but for the sake of diversity, I'm going Big Dokes.
Oh, well,
yeah,
that's good.
The most valuable prospect.
The most valuable prospect who debuted 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just excited about him because he has been grinding away, and anytime someone gets like that second look, I like it. Contracts got that last split for like on EG, for example. Bio's getting it a little bit. Like I always think comeback stories are cool, and I watch them extra closely because I'm like, have you actually grown as a player? Because when he was in the LCS, this is a long time ago, he's obviously grown past this, but he was
like Optic.
It was like Optic. He's like the Yorick guy. He was your favorite player because you love Yorick.
Yeah.
And that's like what he was. He was like a cheese picker a little bit.
A little bit of a cheese picker. I actually thought when he was playing Yorick, though, it was actually good. And I think he played like once or twice. But I still maintain
his entire identity.
I still maintain Yorick is actually really good in a Jace, but no one plays Yorick, so no one knows this.
Shouting into a void.
I swear that matchup is actually really good, and everyone just blind picks Jace. So I'm eternally frustrated that no one knows that Yorick is a champion. But yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he performs in the LCS, because very clearly, like I do think he has developed, right? Like most valuable prospect, that is the MVP award for Academy. He won it, right? Like he was the best player in the league. And so he has very clearly proven that like he's too good for Academy, right? And now the question is like, can you actually step into this kind of upper echelon and be able to perform at the LCS level? Can you show consistent development? I do think that there's been a number of changes, I guess, in top lane this split. Obviously Fudge moving back, Philip getting added, Dokla coming up, but
Gamsu as well.
Gamsu as well. So there's been a number of changes kind of shuffling around like, the mid to bottom half of top laners in the league. But like, can any of these new guys really kind of like encroach upon what is like the elite, which, like guys like Summit and Impact, and like it's like they were dominating last split, obviously someday as well. Like we had like 3 or 4 guys, and I'm probably spacing out on someone else. Who would be the fourth? Pretty much all
Whippo
as well. Pretty much the top 4 teams all had really, really strong top laners. Obviously, Fudge is like coming back to top lane, so we'll see how he's performing.
Yeah.
But like that's kind of the expected like elite, and then it's kind of like Licorice is like just outside that, it feels like, and then there was kind of everyone else.
Revenge
and so now I'm kind of interested to see like Ken Dokla or Gamsu or whoever, any of these new guys actually like encroach upon that top echelon.
I think they will in time, specifically Dokla, and I do think that the community is really harsh, and at times they don't see or understand what development is a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
I have this issue every time when it comes to like a player in the LDL or a player that's in this case Academy, that and actually a good example would literally be Pride Stalker, that was in the European LCS at the time. I don't know if it was EU LCS or LEC at the time, but regardless, went through the ERLs and is back and is looking really good. Like players that have gone through it before can develop, and in fact, in my opinion, develop a little faster because they've been at that position before and know what's required of them. Like they've been pressured heavily. And so in this case, like Dokla absolutely was killing it on CLG Academy. And throughout his time in Academy was just getting better and better. And you're right. Like if now he's back in the LCS, how difficult is that road going to be for him versus the top tier top laners? I don't think he's going to be better than any of the top 4 that you have mentioned.
Yeah.
I do think that he's going to get closer and closer throughout. And one of the biggest benefits is the fact that he's willing to experiment on picks. So the fact that he's playing like AD top lanes, like
Had
AD
his
range.
game, the one game that they all subbed in.
Yeah, that's probably the worst example because he got
Didn't work.
the rash.
Looking forward.
Wasn't that against Impact though? I think.
I think so. Yeah, it was.
Impact's so hard
was.
to punish, man. That's
Yeah.
just like probably the worst person to do those kind of picks against, I feel like.
Yeah, and also listening to his stream immediately afterwards, he was like talking about a specific gank timer. He was like, yeah, this is literally the one thing I needed to watch out for, and I didn't. And he was like understanding of that one, knew what to do next time.
The gank timer for Vayne Top the entire game. Yeah.
But like
Fast River.
Yeah.
that's definitely an extreme example, but like he is the type of person that will experiment on picks.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to be like for him to lose that now that he's going into the LCS. And to just play the usual. It's like, oh, it's a Gnar meta, I'm just playing Gnar. You always hate to see that. If you can punish a pick heavily with a counter, just play it. So that's what I'm excited for the most, is seeing Dokla. I know you mentioned Gamsu. I'm actually excited for Gamsu for a different reason. I'm excited for Gamsu just because like he's one of our old kind of players that had an identity that was established. Like Chef Gamsu is someone that you always like kind of loved to see, and knew that like the kind of environment that he provided and also like his playstyle was so defined. Losing that was one thing, and the fact that he's coming back on his old organization, I think is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Gotta
hope
get
that
Core JJ ADC back as well.
there it is. Bring him in.
No, thank you.
That's how you do it.
I much prefer support Core JJ.
Just for the memes.
What about you? What you're most excited?
So I would say I'm a little bit split between Kenvi and Sports Sven. I actually think that's pretty interesting because I think Sven is an elite player. He has been really good, and he's one of the hardest workers. So I really thought it was a shame that he wasn't in the league. Whether it was with Cloud9 or not, like I just thought this guy should be in the league, right? Yeah. So I do think it's really cool to see him coming in as a support, to see how that actually works out as far as role swap. Speaking of guys like Core JJ, Afro, etc., who he obviously swapping from a different role. But again, we've seen a number of people have successful role swaps. So I'm really thinking, hey, this is another guy who could actually make that happen. And then Kenvi, I think, is just a really exciting prospect. It's something that people have been really, really hyped about for a long time. Whether or not he's going to have a great debut. I mean, we're going to get into our power rankings here in just a second because we've gone kind of long on this question, but I think it's gonna be hard for him coming in because the jungle pool I think is the strongest role actually in the LCS. So whether or not he's gonna have like a cracking debut, I'm still pretty excited to see how he's going to turn out. All right, but let's jump forward. Let's move on to the power rankings
Let's
here.
do it.
So Kobe notably is not here.
He was scared.
Yeah.
He hid under the desk.
Yep. In fact, I can see him now. He's too afraid to just show his head. So just imagine for the people who are watching this on YouTube, but especially for the people that are watching this on Spotify or anything.
Watching this on Spotify, just watching the bar go up. It's at 25 seconds now.
Just for people who are listening
up.
to it, he's here. He just doesn't want to show his face.
So what we're gonna do is we are doing our regular. We had Kobe do the power rankings as always because we're kind of tracking the wins and all that. And we're doing our aggregate power rankings. The aggregate power rankings are not including Raz's power rankings, so it is gonna be Mark, Kobe, and I, so we can check in at the end of the split. Obviously, Kobe will be here, but Raz also did his own. So we're gonna go top to bottom. Should we start with the aggregate and then kind of give our?
I think we say like what the position is to talk about by the aggregate, but then we'll say what we all said.
Yep.
And what's funny is Kobe's not here because he had some very different takes than us at the top 4.
Yeah.
And so he's not here to defend himself.
Just drops his hot takes and then he pieces out.
Yeah. So
Provides no explanation.
TL is number 1 unanimously, or not unanimously, but they are number 1 in the aggregate. Raz put them number 1 as well.
Yes.
You and I put them number 1, and then Kobe put them 3rd.
Yeah.
So
What's happening, Kobe?
what?
And again, so the way we do our power rankings is it's going to be for end of season, regular season.
Yeah, end
so
of
not
season
for
placement.
playoffs. Exactly, end of season placement. TL to me just feels like they were number 1 last split. I think that they're a really strong BO1 team. I do think that they have actually like not only have they had some time off, but I actually think that the meta favors them quite a lot. I was watching a lot of Whippo in Korea. Some of the picks that like kind of the style that he likes to play, things like the Olaf, which Olaf did get nerfed, so we'll see if it actually comes into pro or not. But Swain as well, like some of those different picks, I think that really fit his style are actually quite strong right now and can be mixed in. I also just see TL is much more of that like smart late game team, like the team that I think is better at actually playing slow. Santorin does have like his early ganks and stuff that he mixes in, but like I don't look at that guy and think this is the team that just like goes all in early game, you know, pre-setup dives, etc. Like they would much rather, I think, play slow, set up objectives. I think Santorin and CoreJJ are our best support jungle duo at actually controlling vision and setting that stuff up. Hans is less lane dominant and more about like his 5v5.
Yeah.
So to me, again, this is just a team that I think really benefits from the slower style that I believe we're going to get with 1210 with the durability update. They have incredible individual talents, and you know, as a result, like I think they're going to be on top at the end of the regular season.
Yeah, and I know we're going to be talking about C9 a little later on, but like Team Liquid didn't make any changes.
Yep.
They came in exactly how they left in spring, so I agree with that sentiment, and I do think that they're a team that's better positioned to be that team fighting team, better scaling team. And also they were just the favorites coming into spring. You know, hearing from a lot of the players in their interview after their loss, you know, during finals weekend in spring, like they had a lot of great takeaways. So I just think that they're going to be coming in stronger than spring and also are better positioned.
I think for
regular
me,
season at least.
I still have top end concerns based off that finals weekend.
Yeah.
But that doesn't factor into the regular season for me because, like you said, they're coming in, no changes, good meta for them most likely. They're just monsters in every position. And while it's like, are they better than the sum of their parts? I haven't really seen that so far this year, but that doesn't really matter in best of ones when everyone else is still trying to figure their crap out. So like, I think they're just this stat stick monster that most people aren't going to be able to like, they're not going to drop a ton of games.
Garen.
Yeah, they're just like, they're too good to like actually fall that many times as much as they struggle. Like C9 hit a higher ceiling than them in regular season when they beat them, you know, and in playoffs, EG in 100 Thieves hit higher ceilings than them. I think they can get surpassed, but over the course of a split, they're just always going to be good. They're not going to, I don't think this is a team that slumps.
Yeah, and that's the big takeaway, the consistency of this team. Like the consistency of the players, the only person that I would actually kind of put a question mark on would literally be Whippo during the regular season. Because yeah, sure, he would be trying certain things like the Shyvana would be an example, and at times versus like some of the best top laners would falter in lane and would want to try out like the Lucian, as we kind of mentioned that a little earlier on. But like the rest of the team is just insanely consistent at what they do. And I think a whole heart of that success would be off of Hans Sama and CoreJJ. I think Santorin and CoreJJ would just be consistently setting out vision if they're ever behind or like mostly they're ahead of the pace in the game. That I don't think they'd ever make a decision where I'm ever questioning. It's like, oh, that makes no sense or that's super risky. So I agree. I think very safe, best of one team.
The thing I'll throw in for Kobe, because he's the one who put them third, is I think he's indexing into what I was saying about the ceiling concern. And I think at some point we'll have to talk about it as we move on, because Kobe does have the difference. And slow starts are going to be, I think, a theme for a couple of these other top teams as we get into them. If you guys are ready to move on, EG number 2 in the rankings, but again,
this is largely off Kobe, so
yeah,
we're not gonna go into his stuff too much. I think we can kind of just breeze past it, and maybe we'll check in with him last week. The last thing I was gonna say about TL that I do think works in their favor is that I had heard that they were doing really well in scrim results in Korea, that they were playing against some LPL and LCK teams and actually doing quite well. Scrim rumors are scrim rumors, but like they seem confident that and the meta does fit them. So plus they actually got to have some rest and some time off.
Yeah.
Unlike EG. So I mean, for me, one of the big reasons I had actually put EG lower was because they're coming off of what I believe is going to be the MSI hangover, right?
Yep.
And this is something we've seen very consistently over the years with a lot of teams that go international. The schedule is just straight up brutal. When you go straight from LCS finals, you know, obviously they play all playoffs, you know, they made playoffs, they go to the finals, they win there. I believe when I spoke to them, it was 2 days later that they then went to Korea to like actually start their Korean boot camp and practice and stuff. The schedule is pretty grueling for MSI, pre-MSI as well. So this team has been kind of like going full force. I just saw a couple of the EG guys. When was it? I guess it was Monday.
Yeah.
And I think that they had said that they got back like 2 days ago. So while a lot of the teams did like a 3-week run up towards the split, as far as like starting scrims 3 weeks out, they're starting scrims less than 1 week out before the split, because you know they were in Korea for a while. Some of the players are doing individual practice and so on and whatnot, but like then they took a week off like as a team and stuff as well. So it does feel like they are going to be at a disadvantage as far as like getting going. And again, like I do think that the top 4 in my mind, I could see the top 4. Like I'm very confident the top 4 is going to be the top 4, but I'm not super confident in the placements.
I'm 100% right. Because I think the MSI hangover plus, so I put EG 3, you did 3, he did 4.
Yeah.
I just think that not only that, even if that's not true, and
Kobe has them at 1 again.
Yeah, Kobe has them at 1, so that's why they're 2
that's
overall.
That's why they're 2, yeah.
But I think not only the MSI hangover concern, but this team I don't think really gives a crap about the regular season, and not in a bad way, like it doesn't matter, but in like a standing is whatever to them. Like they never seem too stressed about it in spring, but at least outwardly.
Is that a positive or a negative? Because
it's not a positive, but it's also like why I put them third. Like I think this team in best of 5s has shown that they're a team that, one, will knuckle down when they need to. Stress doesn't seem to get to them. They were not as stressed as most MSI representatives that we send. They're dropping games to Oceania or whoever. And I think that combined with long split that Azael is talking about, that they'll take it easy a little bit. They're going to be trying to figure out this meta. I think they'll be experimenting, and they'll finish 3rd or 4th, but then still be huge threats in playoffs.
Exactly. The experimenting aspect is one thing. Also, at times they were just like, at least last split, were really aggressive, and so when they had leads and were consistently at times getting leads, would throw
them
away.
over.
would chuck it. And another fear is that like a lot of the takeaways that you would get from an international is not necessarily going to be the ones that win you games. So like a good example would be like, oh, we kind of already knew that Danny and Vulcan's laning phase was like pretty poor. They were getting punished a lot of the times in finals weekend during the regular season, and it certainly
mostly just this. I mean, to be fair, their lanings in the regular season, Danny was actually like, you know, pretty positive as far as CSD and stuff.
Yeah.
So, like I do think in spring they did get a lot better, but yeah, they did die quite a bit.
Quite a bit. And so like if your takeaways a lot of the times is we should just be playing this more, and our laning phase, like we should be working on certain picks like these, it's not necessarily going to net you results in the first few weeks if you're going to be changing certain things because of international play. Like you're getting destroyed by Shahu, Gumayushi, and Carrier. Like so like the experimenting factor for me is is going to be like my biggest concern for this team in the regular season.
It's interesting because like I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm just being contrarian, but like I feel like everyone is kind of very quickly like willing to just like hand wave that they were like actually not good in the regular season, and it's like you're talking about like they just don't care that much, like they're just trying new stuff, and like like they're just experimenting with picks, and like they buckle down when they need to. This team was one game away from not making playoffs in spring, and like no one cares because they are the LCS champions, and they had an incredible run in playoffs, which they're the deserving champions, right? Like, but they figured out the meta. They found the style that worked for them, which was really, really effective, right? Like playing just purely through Danny, and they crushed. They crushed in playoffs doing that. But this was a 9-9 team, one game away from not even making playoffs. They won 0 games against our top 3 teams in the league in regular season.
Yep.
And I feel like almost like I'm crazy a little bit because like
you are
everyone who's talking about it is not like addressing the fact that this was like a really bad regular season team for the skill level, right?
Well,
like
so
their drafts were trash. Everyone was flaming this team, roasting this team, and no one thought they were going to go anywhere in playoffs because they were so bad in the regular season, right? So it's like,
so I'll throw a little bit of your own medicine at you about the scrim results for TL. EG behind the scenes,
they were
always very good. I think skill level was never the question about this team, and so that's why I think you can take a little bit of the own logic about TL and some teams. It's like, yeah, they are good. Yeah. They also did well in lock-in, which I don't think you can completely ignore. They fumbled the ending against TL. They got 3-0'd, but
lock-in I can kind of ignore because they played all academy teams in their group.
Yeah, and then they beat the hell out of whoever they played to get over. I forget who it was, but they looked good.
I think they beat FlyQuest.
Yeah, they looked legitimately good during that period of time. And then those teams that they couldn't beat in the regular season, they slaughtered in playoffs. Yep. So like they're clearly not a consistent team, which I think is what regular season often measures, and that's why I don't have them that high relative to how good I think they are.
And we have them the same, right?
Yeah,
we have them 3. But it's just interesting because I'm like, everyone now talks about EG as though it's like a sure thing, and I'm just like, I want it to be a sure thing, right?
Why do you hate
like,
them, dude?
Because I think it's exciting that we have this team with like 3 young NA players, and like, and you know, it was really, really exciting watching them in playoffs, and I think that there was a lot of promise at MSI. Like Jojo Pion, I thought learned a lot at MSI, and so there's this one side of me that is like, man, they really like learned a lot at MSI. This team is going to come back and stomp. Right? They're going to crush. They're going to be like the clear favorites. And then there's this other side of me that is like, what if they just go like 8-10 and, you know, like, and don't even make worlds, right?
And another concern with the drafting problems is a lot of people will like kind of point fingers at like coaching staff. A lot of times it's just players coming to wrong conclusions or like conclusions that's costing them games. Mm-hmm. So for me, during the regular season, there was quite a few of them. Like we talked about, there's like a Danny tweet about like specifically the
Rise Volibear. Oh, that one too.
But that was the same game.
Yeah.
Like the Volibear was like destroying them on side lanes because they just didn't have a strong 2v2. And then like we go into Worlds and like they were the only team that was like just hard spamming the Rise games when Rise was just not good, or at least like was really volatile, and was getting picked to pieces. And they had to also change how they viewed draft, especially for what was working for their team when they got to the event. Mm-hmm. And like, there's an element of like, hey, we should play what works for our team specifically, but also address what like is getting wins in the meta for other teams. And I feel like this team is always kind of having that fight. Like they're always losing games because of it and have to take a longer road to come to the right conclusions. And I don't think this split's going to be any different. In fact, it's only going to be worse because of the less practice time coming into the regular season, how much the patches actually changed the meta. Like so much has changed, including the top lane as a good example, that we kind of forget about like how restricted they are when it comes to draft because like Impact won't play specific carry options, and now we're seeing a lot of Kale and Fiora. Like the picks have changed, and I want to see how much they will change around that. I think that will be a major issue with them.
Yeah. All that being said, I still like do believe largely in EG. I'm more on the side of like I just have the 2 sides of my brain that's like doubting and believing, and I'm more on the side of like I think this team will have a slow start because of the MSI hangover. But I do actually think the team got better, and I do think it's more representative of like they are more the team that did well in playoffs and did solid at MSI than they are the like 9-9 team that can never win
My
against top
brain's
teams.
all gas for them.
Yeah.
I have no other half to that brain. It's not like I have a whole
But you
brain.
still
It's
put
just
them
one
third.
half and the other half.
You just
is thrown
put them
out.
third. You didn't believe that much.
No, but I mean, I'll say this. I think EG is one of my most confident teams to make Worlds of these top 4 because there's going to be one on the outside looking in. I'm most confident it's not EG.
Yep. No, I mean, it's going to be really exciting. I'm very, very interested to see how they do. I also think jungle meta and just like the game slowing down also is good for Inspired, because I do think that Inspired is less the like risky early game guy and more the like smart pathing, gets control, like increases advantages. And I think that style is going to be really benefiting. You're going to be benefiting from that style in this new meta. All right, next we have 100 Thieves. They were our aggregate between, again, Kobe, Mark, and I, for 2.66, so they ended up in third below EG. Mark and I had them at second. Kobe had them at fourth, so again, the kind of biggest difference in this overall.
I had them at third. This is perfect.
We predicted it.
At third, so kind of in the
I'm
middle.
the aggregate. That's my name.
For me,
Mr. Aggregate.
a lot of my top 4, and this is not like, because we're doing regular season predictions, this is not like a sexy or particularly interesting reason. It's literally just like, I think that TL and 100 Thieves are going to finish regular season higher because these are teams that A, don't have the NSI hangover, and B, like Cloud9, don't have a bunch of roster swaps that they're going to deal with. And then Cloud9's also having visa issues and stuff.
Yep.
So it's like 100 Thieves, I actually think I have more concerns patch-wise and stuff with them than I do with some of these other teams.
Yeah.
Because when I think about this team, I think about like, how do they actually win a lot of their games and how are they at their best? It's often about early game dominance from closer. It's about like setting up dives and stuff like that is harder to do now. Yes, the tower damage has been like pushed back a bit, but it's still harder than previous. People are more durable than previous, so I think that sort of play style with like preset dives and moves towards bot and like how they play really early game dominant to get their leads and then kind of snowball games, that is harder to do. But that being said, they changed nothing. This is still a really strong team, and I do think that they're going to come out of the gates pretty hot. They had some time off. They have had their lead in, getting to actually like have like enough scrim time and getting used to this and stuff. So plus they actually always have the advantage of having like a really good academy team to be able to scrim with and learn with even faster. So I do think 100 Thieves is going to come out of the gates pretty hot, and I do think they're going to be heavily in contention for Worlds. But I would say if I had to guess, I'm like least sure of them making Worlds of the top 4, even though I'm putting them second in regular season, just because I think C9 and UG are going to start kind of like a foot back.
Yeah, I have probably a little bit more faith that they'll make a Worlds. I do think they would probably squeak through, like as a 3rd seed. But the reason for it is, this team got better from the split before to into spring, simply because Someday could play carry options. I mean, that carry option in question was Tryndamere. but like, it felt like the team understood from Worlds that they needed to have options top lane just because patches can change, right? What got you 2 Worlds to begin with successfully is not going to be what, it makes you successful at Worlds with how the patch goes. So I felt like Someday individually got a lot better in how he played out his lanes, how much attention closer ended up giving him actually. So it was a lot more varied. The one question that I had with this team, this split, was the consistency of what was strong for them, Abadaga and their bot lane, specifically Abadaga actually. The fact that he was kind of invisible during the regular season and didn't even make it all-pro, where I thought he was going to be first team All-Pro going into that split because of how well he had finished the split prior.
And like Jizuke was gone, Jensen was gone.
Exactly.
He was coming off the bench.
This split should have been ripe for the pickings. Like the weakest mid lane pool that you could have been given, and you weren't there for it. Yeah. Like it felt like you just weren't performing. So that one was crazy to me. And he did get better during the playoffs, and I think that was... people will remember the finals, and that one he also had like some poor performances. But overall, during the playoffs, he was playing, he was performing. And in interviews, when he was asked about it, he was like, yeah, he recognized that when there was pressure, he performed because generally players give more of a shit when the games matter. So like, I think that's easier to address, to come into the next split and recognize that being a fault of your own. So I actually have a lot more faith that Abadaga will be a lot better than prior split.
So
think?
I'm pretty much split down the middle between you two. Like, I don't know if I'll say they'll start hot. I think they'll be up and down for a lot of the split.
Yeah.
Kind of like what they showed in spring, where they didn't start very hot and they ripped off 8. I don't know exactly how it's going to go. They'll still finish high for me. The consistency concern is why, but I'm not even sold based off the playoff thing, because even in the series where they reverse swept TL, the first 2 games were absolute duds out of Abadaga, and he was like, "I'm not playing like a human," or whatever that interview was. Yeah, him and
Play
Closer.
like humans or whatever.
Yeah. Like they were like, and then that's the version that showed up on finals weekend and got trounced. And so like this team just seems to have the gear to get to the next level, but it just doesn't always click, and sometimes they just come out flat-footed and lose the game. And that's less of a concern in best of ones, because if you come out poorly on that day, you lose 1 game and it's whatever. Much bigger concern when that you play 5 games and you're maybe dead for your playoff hunt, when you have this bad day. So I'm not super concerned, but I hope the team comes out angry to this point about like, we got crapped on in finals weekend, like this should have been an easy pool. I didn't show it off. I hope Abadaga and the team, they were training a lot in boot camps in Korea as well. So
almost everyone went to Korea.
Everyone went. I think that was the joke, was that all the LCS teams went to Korea to scrim each other. But I think they'll come out hotter because I feel like they have a chip on their shoulder.
The other thing I would say, like, Abadaga got a lot of criticism, and I think rightfully so, for the regular season, but I didn't think FBI was that great either, right? Yeah. And that was actually like more the thing that I felt like hurt them, was that FBI was just like undisputably like best bot laner, it felt like, in the league, the previous year. Well, there was some dispute, but it was like, at least I think largely agreed upon that, like that was the best duo, that was the best like laning duo. They were really strong in team fights. He was kind of like unchallenged. And it was really exciting to have like Hans coming over, and we're like, it's gonna be this big battle at the top.
Berserker coming in too.
But it really didn't feel like FBI was that much of a part of that conversation. Like, it wasn't like he was bad by any means, but he just wasn't taking over games in the same way that I felt like he did in the previous year. And it actually felt like most people that I talked to just kind of all agreed that he wasn't even like top 2 team fighter last year. It was just like, Berserker is actually better than him just immediately, and like Hans is better than him. Yep. So I was kind of disappointed in that. And I do think, for them to really do very well, I think he's going to need to be that guy. Because my assumption is the game is really going to be slow, and that depends on your marksman so much.
That's why the meta conversation is important, because Closer and Someday carried that team for the majority of the split, even in playoffs.
Early game action.
Yeah. So like, if the game slows down, the bot lane and mid have to step up more.
Yeah, like if Closer can't run the early game in that same way, and there's always like, this is not a sure thing yet, because it does get a little bit weird where it's like, even when you talk about Ardent Sensor meta, which was the slowest meta that there was, playoffs ended up being actually go full early game, because people got so greedy. They're like, well, we're just going to play Lulu, Cog, and Azir, and this and that. And then eventually it came to the conclusion, okay, well, the other team's just going to play Caitlyn Jace and take every single tower on the map. And now it's like, you've gone too far, and we can go full early game and punish you. So if a team is going to play like Kayle, Azir, Jinx, with Janna or whatever, and like a Sejuani, well, maybe Closer actually can just play like Lee Sin or J4 and just run over your team early game. But that's a question that kind of remains to be answered, because I do think Closer at his best is just like, he killed everyone everywhere on the map. It's not usually, Closer was like really, really smart at like slowly kind of eking out farm advantages. And now he's 60 CS up. Like, he's usually down farm, but like did way more and got a lot of kills and pulled off a lot of dives. And if they can't do that, then they have got to be able to kind of adjust and adapt. And that's my like big question mark / concern for Runaway Thieves.
Yeah, and that's why for me, there is a degree of faith in players who it's uncharacteristic for, in my opinion, like for the 100 Thieves bot lane to be playing as poorly or like inconsistently as they did during this regular season. Where in the previous splits, even when they were on Golden Guardians, that they were performing. They were the team, right? And so I would expect that, especially if that was like at the front of their face. Every interview they would be talking about it. Like, they would be in a way their own like harshest critic. That wouldn't be the case. And there is a degree of like, because even the split before, 100 Thieves was a team that was actually going too heavily in brute forcing bot lane with their jungle. Like, if they didn't like send Closer bot lane,
they didn't have a 4-man dive bot, they were going to lose.
Exactly. So like, they changed it up to incorporate Someday a little bit more. And I think that that change. I hope they don't go back into doing that again. But I do hope like that they adapt to that, and I think they will.
All right, let's jump forward to C9. C9 is our aggregate fourth. I had them fourth. Mark had them fourth. Kobe had them second. So again, he had them a little bit higher. Raz, you had them second as well.
Yeah.
So I was gonna say, I actually am really hot on this team.
Me too.
I believe in almost every piece of this team, and the only one that, like, okay, Fudge has to go back top lane. That's not a big change. He's fine. Jensen has to pick back up the pro game. Whatever. He's played forever. He'll be okay. Sven to support is the only question mark, but I've heard things have been going well.
He's really good.
Yeah, people like him. You'll have to see if that translates to stage, but like that seems good. The concerns I have are getting up to speed, so they're all at that peak that we know that they can hit, and then Visa concerns.
I've heard they might have as few as like 2 of their intended starters.
You might see.
Ew.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
I won't leak, but like it might be a very slow start for this team. That's the only reason they're ranked low for me, because otherwise, I actually think this team has so many threats in so many positions, and it's just like, do they click? This isn't a super team, I guess, but it kind of feels like one.
I feel like they're, as far as like ceiling, it feels funny to put them over TL because TL has just so many big names. But like, I don't know, TL wasn't as impressive as I expected them to be. I think with those big names. So with my more like recent evaluation of how strong the players are, I'm like, if Sven is actually really good. Because Berserker was like, well, he's not that good in lane, but like really when you saw him playing Champions Queue with other supports and stuff, like he was actually just like turbo stomping every 2v2 in lane and stuff.
Winsome was not developed enough yet. You could argue he was one of the worst supports in the league.
Yeah.
And so like, that's not a shot at Winsome, brought up too soon or whatever. But now if Sven can come in and be like even a top half support in the league, I think that's a huge boost to his laning phase.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if Berserker can actually just be winning 2v2s, like if Sven is at the level that they are, just slamming 2v2s, because everyone seems to think Berserker is like the most talented, marksman in the league.
Yeah.
This guy, I'm really excited that C9 did keep him. I was actually pretty sad when I had heard originally, the rumors, Summit's gone, Berserker's gone, like abandoned the Korean, kind of like experiment.
Yeah.
Because I was like, we're going to see Berserker in 2 years, and he's going to be on a Korean team, and he's going to be absolutely stomping us at Worlds, right? Like, that's what's going to happen, and I'm going to be pissed. I'm going to be salty about it. So I'm really glad that we kept him because he was incredible. So if their laning is good, like all of a sudden, that's amazing. Jensen has been so consistent for so many years. If Jensen is like, at a similar level to where he exited the league, like his last performance with TL at Worlds was good.
Yeah.
In the regular season, I think he wasn't as motivated, and his regular season wasn't that great, to be honest. But like the mid lane pool is weak in the LCS right now. If Jensen is like, performing at a very high level, Blabber is like always, I think, regionally the best jungler.
Yeah.
If Fudge is getting back towards his level, like I feel like this team could be the team that's just winning LCS, right? Like, but there are a lot of ifs, so that's why it's a little bit hard. And I bumped them down more because I'm expecting that there's going to be some visa issues and whatnot. And Super Week is week 1, right? So even if you only have visa issues and stuff for 2 weeks, that's 5 games. If you start like 1-4 or whatever, something like that is going to knock you down significantly in the standings, right? Like the number 1 team last split was 14-4. That was TL, right? If you rattle off 3 or 4 losses, or God forbid 5 losses to start a split, you are going to be way down in the standings, and I do think that's going to hurt them. I don't think where they finish in the regular season is really going to matter as long as they are finishing strong going in towards playoffs, because I'm pretty high on them as well, and I think, there's a lot of questions, and maybe I'm glossing over like these things too easily. Like, of course, Fudge is going to be as good as he was, and of course, Jensen's going to be as good as he was, and of course, Sven's going to be, really, really good, because he still remains to be seen. But like, if those things happen, I think this team could win the LCS.
God, the case for Super Week being week 1 might change my actual opinion. Just because I was just taking a look at the schedule that has been released.
Yeah,
and
5 games in the first 2 weeks. Right?
Yep,
So if you have a slow start, that hurts.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the teams they're facing too, like EG on day 1, Team Liquid on day 3, and then 100 Thieves in week 2. I'm assuming that they still won't get like some of their players. We'll see what it looks like. Then yeah, that can change quite a bit. The reason why I have them so high is just that I feel that this team, because I would say they're my early pick to win the split. I know we're talking about the bot lane and how good they can be. I think way too many people think that it takes. They just think that a role swap or a change in position will take a very long time for a player to acclimate. I don't expect that to be the case. I think with Sven, that's going to be probably the longest time, and it'll probably only take a few weeks. And even then, like I think the biggest challenge is mostly just going to be him working alongside Berserker because they haven't even had the opportunity to do. I'm pretty sure. So like that one is my biggest question. But my biggest answer is I just think that they have the best like top side. I think that Easy Blabber is going to be the best jungler in the league. I think Jensen is going to be the best mid. He's been playing 2 in his off time in Champions Queue, and so like I don't feel like he would be able to miss. He only lost a split, so I have no concerns that in this pool of mid laners that he would be able to come out as the best mid laner of the split. And then top lane, last time we saw Fudge top, he was second best in my opinion to Alfari. And he was always somebody that if he had a lead, that he would always kind of translate that to team fights.
He's a really good playmaker. I felt like he was like more of like a Bwipo than an Alfari, you know, where it's like he's gonna like make things happen, not necessarily like beat 20 CS up.
Exactly. And if the comp was playing towards bot side, he would be able to soak a lot as well. So I felt like he was one of our smartest top laners, and so the change I'm not concerned about. So I think this team is just going to be the most well-rounded, with the only question going to be the first few weeks with the bot lane. They'll int a few times, I'm sure, because of how much has changed.
Everyone ints a few times.
You get a couple. It's a long season.
You get a few. The funniest Reddit comment I saw about this bot lane is like, oh, you have a player who's like learning the language in Berserker and a player who speaks way too quickly. And then has your bot lane who's machine gunning words.
What do you think, Mark, about, so like my concern, I'm curious to see if you kind of agree with, anytime there's a role swap, is just like the change in mindset that has to happen, because support is traditionally the primary engage, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you have now got to be the guy who is like has that killer instinct and decides exactly when to go and has the confidence in when to go, assuming he is still going to be their primary engage. Versus like, you know, that shift from, as an AD, it's always follow up. It's always like, make sure you're prioritizing your life, you know?
Yeah. I think Sven has been an aggressive player. I think for some reason people thought he was a KDA player, but like he's always been, I think, someone who has been in between the like, I'm going to turbo stomp lane and I'm going to sit back too far and sack CS. He's I thought, always ridden that line pretty well. So I don't think that will be the biggest hurdle to overcome in theory. On stage is obviously a different question of like, oh, I should have flashed in there. I missed like that split second window where I get the 3-man pull instead of the 1-man.
Think about it.
Yeah. So that's more my concern than like a philosophical, like if you put Reckless, for example, at support, then I would be more concerned about that. Sven's not that guy.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, let's jump forward to TSM. TSM, this one we actually had some very different rankings. This is when the
power rankings blow open. The top 4, we all agree with the top 4. From here on, it's a crapshoot.
So it's interesting because you said you don't actually agree that the top 4 could be shuffled. I actually felt like, in my mind, there was 4 teams that were very clearly going to be at the top, but I didn't really know about the order. And then I felt like there was 6 teams at the bottom that also don't really know
that
about
part.
The order.
I have no clue either.
And so this is where things get a little bit wacky. So TSM aggregate, again, Raz is not counted in the aggregate, but we have them as an aggregate. They're 5th, but the like point score, whatever, is like a 6 overall. And so I had them at 5th. Mark had them at 7th. Kobe had them at 6th. Raz has them in 9th.
Okay, you two debate.
So Raz is
I'm
like,
in the middle. You hate him. You love him. Go ahead.
His team is gut.
Why do you hate him?
So so my issue was
why do
Spring
you
Split.
hate TSM and all TSM
Oh
fans?
no! Look, I think after Spring Split, TSM fans hate TSM. So like, so I don't hate them. I think their conditions didn't change very much.
You loathe them.
I just don't think it changed
Despise
much.
them.
Because it's the same situation where you say the players themselves are good. Like Huni is a great top laner. We've seen him what he was able to do in the past. Spica is a great jungler. I have him personally, like I have these players individually higher than I did in spring, including tactical. I think their issues was twofold. The first fold is we don't know who's going to, like, what's happening in the support position, right? In the support position,
Mia or Shenyi.
yeah. Is it going to be Mia or Shenyi? I think initially they're going to be starting Mia, the last I heard. But I remember in Spring Split, come week 2, they changed all of that when they weren't performing immediately.
I think there was a deleted tweet from Kays or someone from the staff who said that they're going to be fighting for the spot, basically.
So the idea is that they would be fighting for the position. Like the messaging on that is the most confusing one. And so I don't like that, especially if that's the lane that you play through. If that's your strongest lane, if that's what it's like, because off of TSM's wins in the previous split, it was tactical carry.
So you're not buying what Maple is selling?
Like nope. I like the idea of Maple too. I like the idea of somebody that is going to be a facilitator and playing through other lanes and has more experience, right? I think they're going back to the problem they had in the first 5 weeks of mixed language in your roster. Maple's English, I was really interested in. I remember I was talking to certain people like Rayra or Jenny from the PCS, just kind of having an understanding how much English he knew. And actually, Champions Q answered that for me, where it was like
he's got solid basic English. I would say, like he can like say like summoners and like let's fight, or like I'm 6 and like very basic, but like that all seemed clear enough when I've watched his stream a lot.
Yeah, and I think the only concern would just be if there are any aberrations, any changes in plans, or like where you have to explain a little bit more than just
conversations outside of games.
Exactly. That can get a lot more difficult.
Yep.
Where I think in the end of the split for TSM that had been resolved, mostly because of like they made changes in the roster and Shen, you got a lot better in understanding the language, so they didn't have to run into those problems. But I think they're going to run into those problems right from the beginning, and I think that you can't have. I would view support like I would say the second most important role in the game. I think jungle is really important. I think how your support plays the map is really important, and that being a change in my mind consistently, and also just those players being a lot more green is going to be an issue. So just from the outset, I want this team to be firm, consistent. Mia played well in Academy this split so far.
Firmly in 9.
But like,
why are you trying to gas him up? You're
that.
the negative person. He's about to say some good stuff.
Yeah.
You say all the stuff that sucks.
So for me, I do think people are kind of forgetting that this team also just got better towards the end of the split, right? Yes, they finished in 9th place, I guess tied for 10th, but they had the head-to-head.
Yeah.
They started the season 1-9. They won 4 of their last 8 games. They won 3 of their last 5 games. Like they were getting better, I felt, towards the end of the split already. I do think that Maple is an upgrade, for mid lane over Takeover. Like I've watched basically all of Maple's streams. He's not going to be, at least my expectation is he's not going to be the guy that's actually crushing lanes.
Yeah.
I don't think that he is like the never misses CS, dominates you in lane kind of guy. I haven't actually been super impressed with his laning, but his laning that I have seen has not really been exploited either. And I do think he's actually very good at moving around the map and facilitating his side lanes, facilitating his jungler. His team fighting and stuff is good. He has a tremendous amount of experience. Also, having talked to Chawi, like they feel relatively confident that like he is going to help enable Spica. And one of I think the big concerns for TSM last split, one of the big problems that they had was that Spica had to be the guy who's like translating and shot calling and doing all these things. And like he had that tweet where he's like, I wish all I had to do was play the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like TSM kind of took that to heart a bit. And so my understanding is that, Maple is supposed to be more the guy who like some of this is depending on.
Yeah.
Doing some of the shot calling, doing some of the facilitating, and if that is true, and I'm a little bit bought in that it is, then I think Spica should be able to have a much better split. I think that they were already on the up and up, and Tactical I think was playing like pretty well towards the later half of the split also. So I am more confident in that. Also, if the game is slowed down, like the laning matters less than shot calling and decision making and stuff, and that is where like Maple has a tremendous amount of experience, right? This is one of the most experienced mid laners in the world. Like he's played forever. He's done a lot of international play. So I do think that like they should be looking better. But again, between 6 and 10, I think there's not like a tremendous amount separating these teams as far as like how I see it. It's going to be more about like who shows up. But for now, I'm feeling like pretty good about TSM.
Yeah, the only question would be because at the tail end of the season, I remember I think it was a game versus Golden Guardians or something. They ended up winning, but it was one of the more messier games. And it was just because when their support and jungle were just going out to get vision, they were getting caught out repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is actually going to hurt them if the game is slower and they have to rely on just vision play more. That's more of a highlight on your jungle and support playing the map. So that's where I would see the issues.
I mean, the other thing that we haven't talked about at all is the organization's on fire.
Yeah.
And you can't just sweep that under the rug. There's going to be relationships that were damaged last split that are not going to be mended just because you bring in one new guy. I don't have much confidence in the org to get the most out of these players, even if in theory they're a 5th place team. Maybe that'll change and like, oh wow, they turned it around. But like, just even having deleted tweets already heading into the split about who's starting and stuff doesn't show me that this org has its ducks in a row to get the most out of these players. And that's the X factor for me. I'm somewhere, who knows exactly if the Maple experiment's going to work, if it's going to unlock the team.
You have them 7th.
Yeah, I have them 7th. I split the difference, but like it could be literally anywhere. This is the team I know I have the least thoughts on. Anyways, let's move on.
Okay.
We're 60 minutes in. We got 5 teams to go.
Yeah. It's also like even last split, the difference between 4th and 7th was 1 game.
Yeah.
As far as the standings.
I mean, I feel like this will be a close split.
I think so too. And talking to some of the coaches and stuff, they think it's going to be pretty close as well. Golden Guardians is our next team. We have them as an aggregate 7th or 6th, I guess this would be.
Yep.
So Mark had them at 8. I had them at 7. Raz had them at 5. And Kobe also had them at 5. For me, it's kind of like they I guess I'm dropping them in the standings a little bit compared to where they finished last time. I just feel like some of the teams got better around them. It's not like necessarily like a condemnation of them, but like I can see like I talked them to an arrow and stuff, and like if they're able to really like enable 6A and 6A works kind of better with the team, you know, I know that they talked about like having some some feelings of like 6A is just going to like work better with the personnel and stuff, and that's going to be like, you know, more on the same page, that like Ole and Lost didn't necessarily see the game as being played the same way, and that caused issues. Like they didn't necessarily agree on how they should be playing.
Yeah.
So if 6A and Ole are more on the same page, 6A was doing pretty well in academy. He was playing aggressive. So that could be an improvement. I just think that like the team didn't really change, and I think that a lot of the lower end teams got better around them, which is like a little bit of a lame reason, but that's kind of like why I bumped them down.
No, I mean I use that reasoning for some other teams too, like CLG. When we get down there, I'll explain that. But like for Golden Guardians as well, there were grumblings all split long about personnel.
Yeah.
And not all the personnel changes that we've probably all heard happened. And so like I don't think this is a team that feels great right now. I don't think that they ever seem to work that well together. They were very hot and cold over the course of the split. Like right when you think they're about to turn on, they stumble again. And I have concerns about them for that reason. Like just when you think they're looking good, they get these massive leads over 100 Thieves, they punt them away.
And
they're just inconsistent.
Pride Soccer's assassins are like gone.
Yeah.
Which I think hurts them quite a bit, because that was actually a number of their wins and their advantages was like they had this guy that like uniquely plays this thing. Assassins are like out of the meta completely, it feels like now.
Yeah.
That's my biggest question with them. 2 things. First thing is their draft. They were the team that had probably the wildest, you know, view of drafting in the LCS, just because of what Pride Stacker's values were, like playing Zed and all these picks. He actually had to change that a lot with, you know, as the split went on, and they were just not winning out or closing out their early game leads. They needed to scale a little bit better, and I felt like it turned into more of Nocturne. So I do think that that's going to be their big question, is drafting around Pride Stalker's picks. Another one would also just be what's happening in Academy, because with some of their grumblings in their roster.
But you have them at 5, so you're pretty confident in them.
So I had a lot of questions, but also they're a team that I think got stronger with Stixay's addition.
Okay.
I thought Stixay performed really well in Academy, in a decent Academy AD pool, and also as a player, he is a little bit more aggressive in how he wants to play on team fights. So I think he's going to play team fights a lot more better. And also this team, when you're getting slapped in the mid game, you kind of start needing to focus on. I would be shocked if their mid game didn't get any better with how wild some of their games have gotten, especially the one versus 100 Thieves, where they had like a 10-something K gold lead and then it instantly lost it because they weren't playing through sides. Where Licorice, who was kind of like an unsung hero on that team, how consistently he was able to get leads on some of his picks, and a lot of times they just didn't really play through him. So even though I have GG 5th because I felt like they only got stronger based off their roster changes. They were already on a good note in how consistently they were playing out their early games. And then also, like, I feel like playing out your mid games is something that I hear from them a lot, something that they are recognizing. They already improved in how they drafted around their current issues throughout spring. So I do think they'll only get better here. I have them at 5th just because I think the teams around them did change and would need time. So although Golden Guardians, the beginning of the split would look good, or at least like for the regular season, it's obviously going to change when teams have more ground underneath them during playoffs. So that's my reasoning for having them here.
I think that's a fair reason. Start hot and cold. It's about the placing, so that all matters.
Yeah.
Moving on to FlyQuest. This was my like team that I put 5th because we're all gonna have different.
We flipped because last split I was the one that had them highest on the dive, and you and Kobe had them low.
So
now I
to
have
be
them
fair,
low, and you put them up to 5.
This was before the Phillip news. If you missed it, they swapped Kumo for Phillip. Otherwise, it's the same 4
would this
returning.
change your power rankings?
It might. I'd have to think more about it. I don't have time.
Wait a minute.
But let me
I think it was cop out.
let me first say. So they got to collaborate.
It might if I'm wrong, but if I'm right,
No.
it will.
No, hold on.
I'll let you know after.
Everyone else put them 8th. Everyone else put them 8th. I put them 5th. I wanted to doubt them all split long. Last split, I thought they were frauds, and I was just waiting to get proven that I was right. You know, I think everyone had that feeling. And then they got crushed by EG. We're all like, haha, we knew. And then EG crushes the entire rest of the league. And so I didn't feel like I ever got that data point to be like, you guys are frauds. I think Takoi was in the top half of the league. He got an all-pro. I think Jose Dioto had his best split. I think the bot lane is very consistent. I think Afro is incredible at getting people leads through his playmaking and shot calling. And one of the reasons I continue to rate them high is even though I didn't really like Kumo individually, I felt like the team worked well as a unit. With Kumo getting benched, I have more concerns about how this team is operating internally, which is more of a concern than Phillip for Kumo, because I don't think individually it's like, oh my God, they benched Kumo, now they're in trouble. That's not my perspective. It's more, if they're making roster changes, they're not getting what they want out of the team right now. And that's why... That's what would make me doubt my own 5th placing. But for now, I'm just going to lock it in. Screw you guys.
So it's interesting because you said you never got that data point to prove that they were frauds. What about the fact that they started 5-1 and then won 4 games? So that's a split, right?
What about our entire bottom half of the league, dude?
I know, but I'm just saying it's like they went 4-8 in the last 12 games of the split, right? So to me, that did show like, hey, like this team clearly has some problems. Like they have some solid pieces, but they just never felt like they were really, you know, able to bring things together. And that's why I actually dropped them down a lot about that. Like a lot of their wins were with this roaming Janna, roaming Lulu type support, like the Enchanter support type thing was at least a couple of their wins. I can't remember exactly.
It was like 1 or 2 actually.
One or 2. Okay. But like they started off really hot. I do think Jose had the best split he's had in an A, but even with that, you know, finishing 4-12, Phillip, you know, I talked to Sharks, their coach. Phillip, I don't have a ton of confidence in. You know, basically what I got from my conversation there is that they really like his attitude and they think that like he's a really good like cultural fit. It feels like more of a long-term play. This is a 19-year-old kid, and he's from Canada. Plus for me,
There it is.
But it's like, you know, they really talked a lot about his attitude and like how he views the game and how he views improvement. They feel really, really good about that. But, you know, they were saying that they think, you know, by the end of the split, he could be up to like Kumo's level, right? He did not lane well in Academy at all, right? Like he was one of the worst laning top laners in Academy. You know, you look at his average CSD and stuff, and you look at some of the games that he was having, like he was significantly behind against a much weaker pool of top laners. I have a lot of concerns that if you finish on this, like with this weak run, and your top laner is coming in and like, sure, maybe he's going to get there and be even better next year and really be that long-term play. But if short-term, he's like significantly weaker than Kumo, who is already not one of the better top laners in the league, I think this guy might just get absolutely run in top lane.
Yeah.
And that would be very concerning, I think, for FlyQuest and for their chances in the regular season.
Yeah. They're like, this feels like a side grade at best, but like later on in the split for sure. Whereas I was interested in seeing how he developed because he did get to play a few Academy games, you know, this split. And so I was watching those games and he's blinding a lot of his top lanes like Gwen and GP like in first phase. And so like he is getting counterpicked, but he is getting kind of thrashed in lane where he shouldn't be. And I think that's the biggest concern. I think the biggest highlight for me, I think, was the GB versus Vlad game versus 100 Thieves Academy when they were going up against Tenacity. And Tenacity, I felt like destroyed him in lane. And so laning phase would be a question mark, whereas Kumo gave them wins at times. So like I did believe that Kumo was for sure
his Journey Mirror game against 100 Thieves was like actually just a carry.
100%. And he's the type of person that through his you know, grinding of the game, like he was the first one, the most willing to play those enchanters in the beginning of the split. And sure, I think his creativity can get the best of him. His Riven game, specifically Kumo's Riven game where he got thrashed, like there are times where that happens, right? But I expected them to play Kumo. I'm fine if they want to throw in an Academy player for the experience and just also see how far he can go if he has a good attitude and process of development. Then maybe you can go far with
Anytime I
that.
hear like you're making a move for like culture fit and that type of reasons, even if it is a long-term play, that makes me then assume that there was some issues with the other player's attitude, right?
Yeah.
Or just like they weren't getting what they wanted out of their top laner.
Yeah.
Like maybe Kumo was just silent, didn't communicate enough. The one little last bit of optimism I'll throw on here is they beat a lot of the top teams. They were 1-1 against C9. They were 1-1 against 100 Thieves, TL, where a lot of the bottom teams just could not win against the top teams. And I think that veteran shot calling that Afro can bring and the other bright points on the team shouldn't get swept under the rug just because of the Kumo Philip thing, which is, like I said, a concern. But.
Yeah.
So like I had them pretty low. I think the one angles in which I could be wrong is I like their drafting philosophy during their split. I think they oftentimes played for scaling and played for their mid jungle duo, and their mid jungle duo performed really well for them. For
Tukui was really good.
Yeah,
I think he was actually like their biggest star, right?
Yes.
In spring, like he was, I want to say second all pro mid laner. I thought he was really, really good. So I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting.
So if they win through that, then like they can definitely climb the rankings on that one, on that front. I think the mid pool got better. Jojo Pian near the end of the split was getting better and better, so that was like a more confident point.
Jensen and April are both upgrades.
Exactly. So I think that's going to be harder, is if your strongest point of the map is now going to be challenged a lot more. So we'll see what this team ends up looking like. But they individually looked pretty good when they were in Korea. They were streaming a lot of their games, so it was nice to see them. So I'm interested in this team the most because they were definitely the most surprising team of spring, and maybe they can double down on that.
Yeah, no, it'll be exciting. And again, I really think it's so hard to predict the bottom 6 teams, right? Like I don't think there's going to be a lot separating them.
Yeah.
And it's largely going to be like who performs above expectation could be the difference between being like 8th or 9th or 10th and actually being like 6th or even 5th, right? So it will be really interesting to see when we get things taken off. Dig is who we have next in the power rankings. Mark and I had them at 6. Kobe had them at 10th. So
Raz at 7 as well.
Go.
So the one guy who's like, no, you're all wrong, isn't here, unfortunately.
We're all pretty similar. To me, it felt like you know the Gamsu change I think is a positive, right? I do think that talking to Dig and stuff, like this is something that they're hoping is just going to give them like more stability, right? Not necessarily going to be the guy from what I've seen in the academy that's just going to like 1v9 games or be really more the carry thing. I think it's more about giving them stability in top lane so they can play, you know, how they want to play, which largely was towards bot lane. I remember the pro to pro with Blue, I think, and High, where he was talking about like, oh yeah, like we want to play through bot, and like that's the way that we've decided is the best way for us to play. Their bot lane is strong. And if top lane can be really stable, maybe their bot lane can be enabled more and they won't drop some of these kind of like random games just through like bot lane or top lane getting blown up. So I think that like that would be the kind of like glass half full take on them. Again, I just think that some of the teams around them made kind of like bigger, better changes, which is why they got bumped down a little. For my mind at least, like I thought, you know, TSM's changes kind of like bump them above and some of those things. But I do think Dignitas should be solid. And to give some credit to Dignitas, I think that they're one of the teams that seems to get the most out of their rosters.
Well, I was going to say also, you technically bumped them up. They finished 7th last split. You put them 6th this split.
Oh,
so
I thought. Oh, you're right. They were 8 and 10. Yeah, you're totally right. Yeah.
So you know what? Let me gas this up even more. I
Boom.
think they actually have a win con. A lot of teams in the bottom half of the league don't have a consistent win con. It's like someone might pop off, maybe this, maybe that. Their bot lane was legitimately good. River is legitimately good. Blue was hit or miss, and Fake God was mostly missed. So to your point about like shoring up topside and just knowing their identity, or getting a lot out of these players, like all that still holds true for me. So I think they'll just be a slightly more consistent version of what we saw last split.
Yeah. And to kind of hype up Blue a little bit more, like he definitely performed much better than our expectations. And I remember, I think both of the matchups that he had versus Abidaga was just playing better. So the team, you're right, has an identity. I think the biggest question for me is the Gamsu pickup. He fits exactly the build that they were looking for in a weak side top laner. Exactly. But like, I think he's, you know, definitely the bottom 3 of top laners for me individually. From Academy, I'm actually quite surprised we didn't get to see like, I know Jenkins is down there as one that I would like to see in the LCS. He would have performed better. Darshan.
Well, he obviously was just in the LCS, right?
True.
But it just got replaced.
Yeah. CLG was
Tenacity's in Academy still. So like there are a few top laners that I do think would have been solid for that position or a lot more flexible. That's going to be something that they'll still kind of suffer with, is like their top lane is still going to get punished. He's going to be a lot better in that position in comparison to Fake God, but it's still going to be a talking point.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Fake God really struggled, right? I think Fake God obviously gets a lot of criticism, but I do think like he was a clear weakness for the team, and like I think a lot of people are kind of like at the point where they're like, oh, we've seen like a lot of Fake God. It doesn't feel like it's
Yeah.
like he's really making any great strides in development. So maybe he'll be able to do that better in academy.
Yeah, I think it's the right call. If I was gonna try and cosplay Kobe, I think it's hard to pick a 10th place team, and he just picked this one, or he thinks that they were legitimately frauds.
Grill him on the next
In
episode.
spring. It's one of the two, because I think this team has shown at least a little bit that like they have pieces that work. So I'd be curious what his reasoning is.
Dig just seems to do a good job. Like I think their staff gets less credit than they deserve, because it's like this team usually has very little budget and seems to like pretty consistently be like a middle of the pack team with less budget and without any big star pickups. Like, right? Like, what was their like big crazy signing? There wasn't really anything. Like River, I think, was the one that people have been most excited about. But return of Biofrost worked out really well. Neo's been good. I would say from maybe the Kobe mindset, and I have a little bit of concerns about this as well. River is really good, but again, how did River dominate games? Early game.
J4 camping.
Yeah, J4 and early game. And if it becomes 6 camp clear meta, like base, get ready for objectives, that's not where River succeeded. It's not that River can't do that, but like what separated him from the rest of the league was him just running over early games. So when I think of the 2 junglers that it felt like their teams were most dependent on them just trashing early game to win, it felt like Dig and 100 Thieves. Closer and River, I think, were the best teams at actually, creating those massive early game advantages. And so if he can't do that, then I could definitely see Kobe thinking, hey, like they won because River made these big advantages. If that doesn't happen, maybe they won't win.
Yeah. We'll have to see when he's here next week. 9th place aggregate almost across the board.
Except for Raz.
Yeah, well, he doesn't count. The aggregate was a universal 9th. Kobe, me, Azael all said 9th. Raz put him 6th. He's a believer in the Kenvi. He's snorting the Kenvi copium.
It's not just Kenvi for me. I mean, like, I do agree that Kenvi is going to be a good jungler. I think the jungler...
They made a lot of changes. They made a lot of changes.
Yes, they did. I think the biggest change for me is actually Ignar. Just the fact that they can play... They also have a pretty, solid identity as a team. That Ignar is a player that wants to be able to roam, work with his jungler. His jungler
got Lost as well. So they changed their whole bot lane. Ignar Lost, and they brought in Kenvi.
Yes, and so Lost as a player has that experience when he was on TSM and a little bit when he was on Golden Guardians of just basically, you don't need to play towards him. He'll be fine on his own and just farm out and be a low resource AD carry, as the top side of the map is going to be getting value. And for IMT, they were really close to winning a lot of key games. And in fact, lost a head-to-head in 2 of their games versus TSM, where like they had considerable
They lost
leads.
some tragic games. The Casio game where Power View was like 3 or 4K up individually. That was one of the most tragic losses I've ever seen.
That one was really bad. The first one, which was really early in the split, where they were literally at the Nexus and it felt like a foregone conclusion, and Wild Turtle gets caught. Like, they have a lot of those games, and I felt like they only got stronger in terms of like a firm way to play a game. If you ever have those questions, like Ignar will be very firm in how he wants to play the game, so you play around it. And I think the top side of the map is aggressive. We already mentioned Kenvi. So I think this is a good change, especially since I think Revenge is one of the, like, I had him listed as like a 5th or 6th, best top laner, just behind Blippo, and like competing against like Licorice and Huni. I think he's someone that you can play towards and is a carry option. So he had a lot of good games, even in their
I
losses.
didn't have him on that high up.
Yeah?
No.
That'll be interesting, because like I think he performed well in the last split, but obviously not going to be hitting the top 4 teams that were there. So they have a win condition. I think Kenvi will win you games clearly through not just the fact that he is a strong carry jungler, but also if he's put behind, I think plays incredibly smart in trading and not being too far behind, a trading side of the map, that is. Like, that's, I think, one of his greatest values. So, good team. I think this is really solid choices for them that will make them, I think I had them as 6th, yeah.
It'll be interesting. Like, so I talked to Immortals. Kenvi's signed till 2024, so they're very excited about that. Kenvi also had multiple LCS offers and chose to go to Immortals. Even though like he was the last piece of the roster, so he saw everyone else. This is the choice he got. I don't know who he was all choosing between, right? But he had some options and chose to go here. So they are very happy about that. They're also very happy about the fact that they have 3 residents that are 23 and under that they have now, and they feel that they're getting some pieces that they can kind of build around. Kenvi, is really exciting on 100 Thieves Academy and like 100 Thieves Next, I guess, prior to that. But I don't think he's going to have a hot start in the LCS. I think it's hard when you're coming in on a bottom team to really dominate and have that same like kind of level of play. The other thing is that 100 Thieves always played towards Kenvi, and like Kenvi was, the Kindred guy and like playing all these carries, and his team really enabled him. And like in the LCS, I don't think that they're going to do that, especially not in this current meta. So I think he's going to have to really kind of like relearn, how to jungle. Like I also think jungle is the strongest position individually in the LCS.
Yep.
So I think it's going to be really hard, even if he is a great prospect. And I think he is a great prospect and could be really good in a couple of years. I think it's going to be a tough debut to come in, and all of a sudden your team is not playing for you. You have to play for your team, and you're playing against massively better players than you were in academy. I think is going to be really, really difficult. And Lost to me is just like he is like a talented player, but he plays team fights so cowardly. Like he ends all these fights with his ult up and his summoners up, and like he just seems so scared to really commit. And so it's like with PoE not having a good split, and Kenvi coming in, I think that's gonna be a big adjustment. I just don't know like who the guy is, right? And that's kind of my concern. Like if PoE can just play control mages and dominate, then like maybe this team really jumps up a lot. But like I just don't know who Immortals guy is.
I think so. I agree with that. Like the early game, who's doing things to get you to mid to late game where other people can carry.
Yeah.
I agree with most of what you said about the players, and I think there are peaks for these players where this team could be good.
Yeah.
But the final piece of the puzzle is that the org has not been impressive. You talk about Dignitas getting more than their pieces, Immortals, that's generally not the case. They burn through 2 GMs in under a year or something like that. Like the reason you don't hear about Immortals being on fire is because they don't have any fans to scream about it, unlike TSM,
Oh my
God.
I'm telling you how it is, dude.
Title of the YouTube video.
I'm just saying that like this org has
Back on
had
the blame
struggles.
game.
Wow, man.
You have like I heard stories about the team clashing with internal culture. They had that AMA that was like terrible. Even that caught some pickup.
I
That
forgot.
They're
picked up.
posting the scrim right.
Yeah, they're like there's just like a lot of
A
things.
report card.
Yeah, they're putting it on your desk in the morning.
I blocked that out of my memory. That was actually terrible.
Yeah, so there's a number of things not related to the players that's going to make me rate this team lower than I think the players' potential would be if this squad was assembled by a Dignitas or something, seemingly.
Yeah.
So that's the actual reason I put them lower, not because I don't think Kenvi's a great prospect or I'm happy Ignar's back in the league or PoE can be a top half mid laner when he's playing well. Like all those things are true. I just don't think this is the team it's going to happen on.
I will say one thing to be a bit more positive, because again, like I have them ranked low, but I think these teams are close. Is that a lot of their issues felt like they're around mid jungle, and like a lot of I know the team's perception of their issues were around their failure to actually control vision and stuff in like mid and late game, because they actually had a lot of games where they had a pretty good early game, and then the team was just like so disconnected. So if the team is with like they made 3 changes, right? They're 3/5 of their roster changed here. So if they are more on the same page, maybe they will just look a lot better, because in spring they had some good pieces, but they looked like 5 individuals playing a game of League of Legends, not like a team. And that was my biggest issue with them in spring. So if that can be fixed, there's potential for them to do a lot better.
And to answer your question about like who's going to be the guy early, I do think it's going to be Kenvi. And even though he's going to be individually weaker than a lot of the other junglers, just coming into the LCS, like Ignar is going to work with him consistently. I feel like that's just going to be the case. And I mean, I'm not talking about out of the game. In the game, he's going to be roaming and giving him advantages, contesting Raptors. And Power of Evil and Ignar had experience when they were on FlyQuest. True, actually. And actually Misfits as well. But like, and that team went to the finals playing a lot of the times through Power of Evil. So I feel like that is going to be the case where they can play through mid jungle still and find more out of it than they did with Xerxes. And a lot of the times, and also still kind of play through top lane. Just remember, like the pool past the top 4 teams is like
open.
a lot is open. It's a lot lower in skill levels than the top 4 teams, and I think that Revenge performed well in those circumstances in Spring Split. So I actually have a lot more kind of positive kind of reinforcement with Ignar being added to the team.
All right, CLG,
CLG.
last place team here. They're actually tied in our aggregate power rankings with IMT because Kobe had them 7, Mark and I had them at 10.
Raz put them 10 as well, though, so that's why we put them below them. Despite alphabetically, they should be 9th.
It's actually because our producer is a CLG fan. So
Yeah, there it is.
The self-hate there.
Yeah. Like lower
Put
expectations
themselves
for
lower,
himself. Yeah. I think to your point that you made about teams making bigger moves around them, I'm happy Doklo's back. I listed him as one of the people I'm excited to see. Jenkins was a bit of a problem. I think this will be an upgrade, but other people around them made bigger upgrades. As much as I was just slamming Immortals, I think the upgrades they made, CLG was 8th technically, but they were only 1 game ahead of the 9th, 10th situation.
Yeah.
Like they were not significantly better than 9-10. And I think 9-10 made bigger moves. And so that's why they dropped to 10 for me. I was hot on them last split. I wanted EG contracts or C9 contracts with this bot lane that was going to be a threat, and a role-playing weak side top laner and a mid laner that like roamed, and top lane was a disaster. Bot lane was inconsistent. They could carry. I think Luger and Poom are still the bright spot for this team, but contracts was Golden Guardian contracts, not EG contracts, and Palafox was, largely you could ignore him.
I mean, contracts I think got better towards the later half of the split, but still it's like he was the clear worst jungler in the league for a lot of the split. If he is playing at a higher level, this team has more going for them. But yeah, my concern is kind of very similar to what you're saying, where it's like I think Dokla could be an upgrade, but like I don't think Dokla is going to be like that big carry threat. I still think that you're basically all in on your bottom lane, and when you're a lower tier team. With like, you're saying, hey, bot lane's kind of inconsistent, but if that's their only win condition, then like that's really tough. Because Palafox, it didn't feel like was really the guy that was kind of carrying them across the finish line in a lot of games. It felt like it had to be about Luger Poom, and it felt like that was the team's
a lot of weight on their
style.
shoulder.
Yeah. So it's that's my big concern. I know that internally, like their team really was really positive on Palafox and like how hard he'd been working in the off season. Like they did a whole long trip to Korea. They were in Korea for like a month, so they had like the longest Korean boot camp, and then they also had a week off, and then did 3 weeks prep for LCS. So this team feels, I know, internally really, really prepared, and they are feeling positive, and contract's supposed to be doing well in scrims. So like this team may really outperform what we're seeing. But my concerns are very similar, where I don't think Dokla gives them like a true threat in top lane, as to be like that big win condition. And until Palafox shows me more, I still feel like you have one big win condition here, and your bot lane is still like, where would you even rank that bot lane amongst the rest of the league?
Yeah,
they are a team that could win through their bot, but I think it's tough. Teams around them got better, and I struggle to see like what their consistent way to win games is.
So like I kind of viewed it differently. I put them in the same spot because my concern isn't even necessarily like their individual play. Like Dokla, I think, will have good laning phases because he can make the most out of counter picks, or even if he doesn't, like I think his laning is a strong suit of his. And I think Luger and Poom will perform well in lane. Their problem, I think, is in mid game. Whether they have a lead or not, like there are going to be some confusing points where someone makes a mistake and
who's shot calling.
Yes, because like someone will make a mistake and they will only make it worse. As a team, they are not safe enough, disciplined enough when a mistake is being made to kind of recognize that and play back a little bit. If one person makes an error, it just compiles on itself and they'll lose that lead completely. So I think leadership is one thing, but also just in game recognizing that when a play is dead, it's dead. That I feel like this game still does. And I mean, some of the players like Contracts, Luger, Poom are naturally a more aggressive type of players. Same with actually Palafox, and it's kind of shown through his champion pool. So being able, especially in this meta, being able to recognize like valuing scaling a little bit more, knowing that the game's not over, you still have like a scaling aspect on the side of the map that you don't need to play desperate. I think when they recognize that, I'll have more faith in that. But right now, that's not there.
The one positive spin I'll put to echo the like internal happiness, like we were talking about, maybe Golden Guardians had some internal stuff and Immortals had some internal stuff. We know TSM did, like CLG never really had that from anything I had ever heard. And like you said, the players,
I've heard the players are really happy.
The players get along well, they're happy. And I think that can't be understated how much that can help in a long season where like other teams and they're losing games start turning on each other. I don't think this team will do this. So it's very possible that they end up much higher in the standings if other teams like internal struggles get them.
They got better, much better at the end of the split.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you were saying with TSM. Like it felt like CLG really did play much better as a team near the end of it. So I'm looking forward to seeing if they can build off that.
Yep, it's gonna be an exciting one, and I could easily see our power rankings being completely horrible.
This feels like a tough one.
Yeah, this feels like I want to say this was the most trouble I had doing power rankings, I think, in a long time.
I feel like there were a lot of changes for summer.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but it just felt like every team had like at least a little tweak.
I feel like the most we've ever had.
Yeah.
But between splits, you normally get like if there's anything, it's like one guy comes up from academy,
or
we
like
had
a
multiple
top team adds
teams.
something. Yeah.
We had multiple teams do like Cloud9 did like 3 swaps. Immortals did like 3 swaps. We had a lot of changes. It's actually
It's like an entirely new set of top laners in top lane this split.
Yeah. I mean, there was a little bit, we were kind of expecting that. I know going into spring split, it felt like a lot of teams were making gambits and like experimentations in their split. We were talking about TSM, C9, seeing if it worked, and it didn't for a lot of those teams. And so, not
there's
surprised.
just not so much available.
Yeah, they're just like, didn't work next year.
Yeah. But it's going to be an interesting one. That's going to wrap it up for us for now. Good to be back with a dive. Raz, thank you so much for joining us as Kobe abandoned us this
There
week.
it is. And I'm going to disappear once people start flaming the entire
list.
tier list. It's like, I'm gone. I'm not a part
I'm
of this
not
list.
answering for this.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Remember, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode of The Dive. You can also check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor.fm. Remember, submit your questions. We take voice questions on Anchor.fm. If you're sending the questions to us on Twitter, use the hashtag TheDiveLOL. We're going to have the league devs on the show next week, so submit your questions for them. Specifically going to be talking about 12-10, 12-11, the overall kind of game changes there. So make sure to get in all your questions for that. LCS returns tomorrow. It is Super Week. This is coming out on Thursday, so that threw me for a second. It is Wednesday now. Game 1 is EG versus Cloud9. Don't miss it. It's going to be a banger.